And tēnā koutou katoa, you're with The Political Pulse, and my name's Chris. Welcome along, everybody. Today's program, we're going to focus on the second of the two referendums that we'll all get to exercise a vote on the 9th of September, Election Day. And PR announcement, or a public service announcement. If you're not enrolled, please enrol. You've got to enrol. Exercising your vote's one of the most important things going. And so what's been going on? Well, on the social side of things, a shout out to the Carterton Events Centre and for the fact that last Saturday they had a live gig there. And it was the Waratahs supported by their special guest, Ebony Lamb. And it was so good to have live music. So good to have live music. Thoroughly enjoyable. A glass of something nice, taking in the sounds. There was even a little bit of dancing. So that's a really good thing. On the political front, lots been going on. Obviously, we're still dealing with the issues around security at the border, getting in place those arrangements that are going to ensure that before anybody leaves a secure border facility, and it needs to be secure, they have been tested at least twice and they are clear of COVID. So that's been an interesting one to observe. Theme of the week, being thrown under or throwing other people under the bus. Some suggestion that in respect of border security, that Ashley Bloomfield, who I think now enjoys iconic status and a degree of love and affection from the New Zealand populace at large, may not have been as treated as fairly as he could have been in terms of some of the failings around border security. At times you can say, sure, things aren't as good as we'd like them to be, but we still think this person's doing a pretty good job. Second aspect of being thrown under the bus, front bench opposition Member of Parliament, the Honourable Judith Collins, has released a memoir. I think it came out yesterday, in which she's quite critical of aspects of the last National-led government and feels that at one stage, where there were issues around the relationship that she had with the chief executive of the Serious Fraud Office, she was, quote, thrown under the bus by her leader, the Honourable John Key. Anyway, no view on that. If you want to, I guess you can read the book. And if you read the book and you buy it, you don't get it from a library, the Honourable Judith Collins will be absolutely delighted. And Paula Bennett, the former deputy leader of the National Party, has indicated she's not standing. So she's leaving politics after a lengthy career, and she joins her colleague Anne Tolley, who's also going. So a process of renewal, not far out from the election. So quite a bit going on. Now, as I said, today we'll focus on the second of the two referendums, and the one we'll look at today is the end-of-life choice referendum. And in a few minutes' time, I'm going to be talking by phone to the president of the end-of-life Choice Society of Aotearoa, New Zealand, Mary Pankow. But before we do that, how about a bit of music? And this is an absolutely beautiful piece of music. It's live music. It's live New Zealand music. And my recollection is that this clip comes from a concert in Christchurch that was held following the awful events of March last year, and it's a celebration of all that's good about Aotearoa, New Zealand. So here is Holly Smith, Don McGlashan, a few other people, and a wonderful track, Bathe in the River.
like a bird through prison bars. I'm escaping. And behind me on the long highway lies all that I've forsaken. Cool river flow, I'm bound for wherever you go. I'm gonna be
So that was Holly Smith and Friends, I think from Christchurch, and the wonderful track Bathe in the River. It's my pleasure to welcome Mary Pankow. Mary, are you there?
I'm here. Hello, Chris.
Hello. Welcome, Mary. Thanks for your patience while we just let that music play out. Now, Mary, I think as I may have said to the listeners already, you're the president of the End of Life Choice Society of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And today's program, we're focusing on the referendum. So without further ado, Mary, can you tell us about the organisation, how it came into being, what it's about, what its sort of general mission is, and then let's have a chat about that end-of-life choice referendum.
Sure. The End of Life Choice Society has been around for several years. Please don't ask me to remember exactly the dates. But there were societies earlier in Auckland and Wellington. But for many years now, this has been a national group spread right from Dunedin up to Kaitaia, I think. I don't know if it goes any further north. And it's made up of people who share the principle that people should have the right of choosing if they want an assisted death, if they fulfill various criteria. So this has been our aim for many years, and we were delighted when David Seymour picked up the baton from Marion Street and went ahead and managed to get it through Parliament last November. What a wonderful night that was.
Yes. So, as you say, the Parliament has already passed the legislation, and I think as part of the inter-party agreement with New Zealand First said, well, we need a referendum. This is a binding referendum, and if it's supported, it's the case, is it, that the legislation then comes into effect?
Yes, it does. 12 months after the date of the count for the referendum.
12 months for long. So in summary, and I realise there's a lot of detail in that piece of legislation, Mary. What is the? I guess it's currently a bill, an act when it comes into effect. What does it provide for?
Well, it allows people who fulfil about 6 criteria to apply or to ask their doctor for assisted dying. And I think it's the key bit is, what are those criteria? Quite often people have been talking about I would have had myself killed if this had happened. And of course that isn't the situation. They have to be, first of all, terminally ill, and the doctor has to recognize that this is the case, and the second doctor has to verify that. Dying within an estimated 6 months' time, and that they're 18 or over, and that they are New Zealanders or permanent residents at least, and that they are also, and this is all ands, not if this or that, and are suffering unbearably, and it's continuously getting worse, so they're in an advanced and irreversible physical decline. So lastly, and by no means least, it has to be a free choice, and they have to be competent. They have to be aware of what they're asking for and what the implications will be if it gets approved.
Okay, Mary, what about a situation, and a number of us have personal experiences in this, and I know that you too have personal experiences that have influenced your choices and I guess your involvement with the organisation. Say where somebody has Alzheimer's, dementia, and there may well be a power of attorney. The person themselves is no longer sentient, no longer capable, no longer making decisions about themselves. I mean, I know that there's a notion of a living will, but will the legislation provide, say, that a person could indicate a preference and intention, and then someone else gives effect to that? How would that work, or not?
No, this is completely ruled out. In other words, we had a speaker over here from the Netherlands some years ago, and he talked about the 5 to midnight effect. In other words, if you leave it too late, and if you have developed some form of dementia, that you have no longer got you're no longer entitled to receive assisted dying. You've gone too far. You've gone past midnight. So nobody else can make this decision for you. You have to approve that you want this done right up to the moment when the doctor is standing beside your bed or wherever you happen to be. So nobody can make this choice for you. It is your choice. And you can, at that last moment, say, no, I know you've driven out for 4 hours from Gore or wherever it might be, but I've changed my mind, and that is your right.
Okay, but in a situation, say, where I'm afflicted with something that's going to be terminal, I could instruct everybody concerned that there'll be a DNR, a do not resuscitate, Is there a kind of period within which that decision has to be made, or could I elect today, say, as a, God willing, healthy individual, that at some future point in time my wishes would be, to be assisted?
I think we've got to separate out two things. They're obviously related. The living will, as you call it, or the advanced health directive, as sometimes called. And you can, in that, certainly you can write down instructions that you want to have obeyed. You can say, if I get to this stage, if this happens, then I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to have medication that might sort of prolong my life, but it will still drag on and on. You can make all these conditions. You can even say, if under these circumstances I no longer recognize and I no longer wish to eat, I do not wish to be artificially fed. So, in fact, you can ask for that under the current law, and there's no difference.
Right.
So, but you cannot say, you might say it, but it has no legal effect. That yes, I want you to give me some terminal medication. It just wouldn't be legal.
Okay, so there is a window then provided in the legislation within which you can act. And that's fairly closely prescribed, is it, in terms of the parameters, if you like, or the dimensions of that window?
Yes, if you become so unaware of what's around you, you don't recognise people, you no longer understand what the request was that you had made when you were visiting the doctor initially, or when the doctor came to see you. It's been left too long, you've lost it. The window is closed.
Mm-hmm. Mary, for those who have followed the evolution with this debate over time, as you say, we had the legislation through a members' bill through David Seymour, Marion Street, and I think even going further back at one stage, the former MP Michael Laws also may have had a members' bill going to these kinds of issues. And so there have been arguments on both sides, and I think typically the Parliament's chosen to deal with this as a conscience issue rather than a matter of party policy. What about the argument that somebody who has a terminal illness may well be the subject of pressure from, say, members of their immediate family? I guess it goes to the integrity, almost the sovereignty of that person when it comes to making the decision. How can we ensure that, in fact, it is their decision and they're not actually feeling, I better do this, I don't want to be a burden, you know the way the argument goes? Yes,
I know the argument. Well, first of all, as I'm sure you know, the doctor is charged to try and explore whether the family have been putting pressure on. Now, there's been no cases at all overseas where they've found that this has been the case. So that doesn't mean it can't happen, and I recognize it. So that is why the recommendation is that it's not only the doctor, but the nursing staff who are with that patient hour in, hour out, and often are there when relatives come to visit, if the person's in hospital or if they're in a bed at home. They would be much more likely to know about what we normally call coercion. I think in this bill it's referred to as pressure. Mm-hmm. And what fascinates me is the idea of pressure or coercion the other way. Now, there's a really interesting Australian example where from an oncologist who says that he'll recommend a whole variety of treatment, and they've had a lot, and the person is feeling absolutely terrible, and they say, look, I don't think there's as much point. I've done it all. I've had the surgery. I've had the radiation. I'm going to stop. I've had enough. I'm being sick, whatever. And so don't give me any more. So that's fine. And he goes away, or she goes away, whoever the consultant is, comes back a few days later, and they say, look, I think I will have that extra round of treatment or that additional chemo. My family just want me to be a bit longer, want me to be here for so-and-so's wedding or Christmas or whatever. So this sort of coercion the other way happens all the time. And I think that, we tend to forget that. We only look at one form of the evil son-in-law or whatever that's hoping to get mum's house. I think that's a really sad story. But can I just say one more thing? This is about being a burden.
Sure.
I think this is being sort of looked at as if it's something we shouldn't think. Now, I personally think of my own daughter. She's coming up late 40s. And I have absolutely no intention in my latter months or years or whatever it might be of needing to have my bottom wiped by her and fed on a teaspoon or whatever, or having my sheets changed and wiping up my vomit. I'm sorry, I don't want to do that. It's not so much being a burden. It's just not the way that I want my life to be and to be reflected in her eyes. So I don't know whether you call that burden or something else. It's something that really gets to me. I won't do that. And I think a lot of other people feel the same.
Yes. What about the argument, Mary, that and I'm no expert in matters to do with medicines or pharmacology or anything, that medicine has reached a point today where no one need suffer at all, that we've reached the point in terms of science or pharmacology where the comfort of a terminally ill person can be guaranteed?
Well, I'm sure you know this, Chris. That's just not the case. About 6% of people cannot have their suffering alleviated in the last few weeks of life. I'll just tell you about a dear friend of mine who died in December, Reverend Dave Mullen. He was a Methodist minister. He'd had prostate cancer for years. He was one of our most ardent supporters. Believed very strongly with his wife in a compassionate God, a loving God who doesn't want people to suffer. And he went through all the treatment. He came and spoke to people. He was active. He kept maintaining his contacts with the church. The last 2 weeks of his life were hideous and full of nothing but nausea and other sort of pain, that he had to watch his wife watch him suffering, if you see what I mean. And this was the worst thing. This was the one thing he did not want to happen. And it was just awful. So don't ever try to think that all suffering can be overcome. I mean, if you look at bowel cancer, for example, which is, I think it's New Zealand's second highest type of cancer ailment, normally what happens there is after they've cut lots out and the rest of it, the cancer continues, the tumours grow, the gut gets blocked up, and people lie there vomiting up. Sorry to be so crude like this, but this is what happens. They are being sick with feces, and the people who sit beside them for those last 2 weeks have to try and wipe their mouths and wipe it up. And the person, for much of that time, may well be conscious. The only way they become unconscious if they're given terminal medication, and they then spend a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, basically dehydrating and starving until they die and their organs close down. Now, that is not the success of modern medicine. That's just the way life is, I'm afraid, for about 6% of people.
Obviously, I'm sorry for the loss of your friend, the minister. Could I? That sort of segues into another issue, I guess. There's, it's the Orwellian 2 legs bad, 4 legs good. In this sort of situation, is it a matter of people of faith not supporting the referendum, and those of a more atheistic persuasion tending to support it? I suspect not. I mean, I guess it's another way of asking the question, are there people, say, involved with your organisation who are people of faith?
Of course, yes. I mean, not all of us. I'm not, personally. But we have, apart from Dave, we have many other people who are very enthusiastic churchgoers, if that's the definition of people of faith. I'm not sure. People who certainly get together with others and, and worship. And most of them are Christians. We do have a few people who are Jewish and other faiths, but generally speaking, it's we're looking at Christians here, I suppose. So yeah, it's how they see, I suppose, their relationship with God. So I don't know. I can't really talk about that. The one thing I would say is it strikes me as really weird that people say we can't bring a life a little shorter by however many weeks it might be. That is not God's will. But presumably the surgery and the chemo and the radiation we've had before, which is a human invention, if you like, is okay. God's all right with that. But I'm afraid it's not really my business to judge what they believe in that field.
No, and certainly for those of perhaps of a more agnostic persuasion, as one observes the world, God moves in mysterious ways. Mary, doctors, medical practitioners, I seem to recall at the time when the bill was being debated and there were SOPs all over the place, the issue of whether or not what the rights of a medical practitioner might be in this sort of situation. How are they placed in terms of say exercising their own rights, whether or not they're going to be party to a...
They have entirely that option of their own conscience. So if they are opposed to the whole concept, then they don't have to do anything about it. There's only one thing they have to do, and that is to pass on the request of that person to a body which we set up in the intervening year called SCENS. I can't now remember the abbreviation for it, but it's the end of life choice body, if you like.
Yes.
And they can be referred to a doctor who doesn't feel that objection. So they're not required to do any actual process or any part of the procedure themselves if they disapprove of it.
Right. Okay, there's lots of detail. I mean, I think that's been a nice overview of the issues, Mary, and I'm grateful for you taking the time. So people are going to be, I hope, as many as possible, exercising their right to vote, obviously, in the general election coming up the 19th of September. What would be, I mean, the old notion of the travelling in a lift and you've got 3 or 4 floors to convince somebody of a point of view. What would be your essential advice to somebody if you were wanting to encourage them to support, to vote yes in this referendum?
Well, I would like people to follow the sort of argument you're doing now. Be informed, find out about it, so that you're actually making up your own mind based on solid fact. And I'd go to the government website, the referendum website for end of life choice, because what you read there is a very simple synopsis of the current act. So know what you're talking about. If you don't like it, okay, vote against it. But remember, you're not voting for yourself alone. You're voting for other people who don't share your belief. If you're an ardent your opposition to this, you're voting for people that small proportion of people who want to have that choice.
Right, and I think that's a really important point you make, that while you may be firmly of the view that exercising that option may not be your own choice, one might argue in a liberal society it's about providing choices for other people in that context.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Mary, thank you once again for joining us and for communicating so clearly and accessibly the arguments for and anticipating some of the arguments against the referendum. And I hope the listeners, viewers, will reflect on what you've said and, chase down that information that's out there. Thank you.
I hope so.
Ka kite, go well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that was Mary Pankow. Mary is the president of the National Committee of the End of Life Choice Society of New Zealand Incorporated. So that's one side of the argument. Next week, we'll have somebody I'd like to think we could get somebody locally from within the Wairapa community. If not, it'll be, again, somebody that we talk to by phone to give us the alternative view. As I say, no editorial position from me on these issues. Like you, I hope, like you, I'll exercise a vote, but that's between me and the ballot box. So, it's reached that time. Have a good week. Stay warm. Stay well, stay safe. Let's hope that we can continue as the team of 5 million to keep this COVID at bay. And I look forward to joining you again, same time, same place, a week today. Ka kite anō.